is there's such a spectrum of experience. And one of the challenges that we have with understanding ourselves as we're grieving is that we understand ourselves in relation to what we've learned to be true about grief. And if we pigeonhole ourselves and say, well, I'm not experiencing this emotion. Is there something wrong with the way I'm grieving? And there's nothing wrong with the way you're grieving. Every person's going to essentially write their own book as they're going. Our experience of grief is going to be very unique, just like our experience of the relationship with our loved one was completely unique between us and them. And so anxiety, I'll say, is pretty common. It's common with anyone who's grieving because we look at a set of expectations that we have of ourselves to get over it, that grief has, it's been a year, what's wrong with me? Or it's been a month, what's wrong with me? Why can't I pull it together? Because we heap a lot of unrealistic expectations on ourselves. But I think especially at the holidays, there is so much more expectation that we are going to rise to the level of everybody around us in terms of engaging the holidays. And whether it is anxiety over financial stress, 50% of people indicate that on average indicate that their anxiety over financial stressors goes up during the holidays.
And so, Audri, what's so amazing about that is we are not at MSCCN, at military spouse jobs, vet jobs. We are not case management therapists, but we are experts in job search and job placement. We have noticed a real uptick during the holidays in that anxious behavior of got to have a job, got to have a job, got to have a job. And we have come to learn that really what they're telling us is they're stressed about money is the reason they need a job. And all of a sudden, we always tell them desperate isn't a job title, okay? We oftentimes have to calm their fears. And especially when they're going for a job interview, you don't want that employer to hear that desperation. And so it's so wonderful. The reason I'm telling you this, Audri, we feel like we have such a find with TAPS because we are not the experts at emotions surrounding whatever they're going through in that job search. So we can now refer that beautiful candidate to Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors if we even detect grief or suicidal tendencies. I'm not even sure organizations really fully appreciate that. And I hope funders do too. What a service you have, Audri.
Well, I tell you, for those who are grieving already the loss of the military person, that's just one level of grief. But certainly there are so many other secondary losses that people feel. Yes. And at the time of COVID, those are compounded because people are losing their jobs and having a difficult time making ends meet. And what's interesting is that ordinarily, if I were a spouse who had lost my job and I'm struggling to pay my light bill, no one notices that but me, right? I'm in my home. I see the struggle. But at Christmas time, when there's perhaps an expectation that I'm going to, participate with a gift exchange, and I don't have the money to do that, then my struggle becomes visible to others. And that also, right. And that also increases my stress. And that's to include, I've lost my job, I've lost my spouse, and now I don't have presents under the tree for my kids. So that makes the children then become more aware of the financial strain on the family. And that just deepens a person's anxiety around the death loss, but also the loss of other independence and income and ability to care for ourselves.
Audri, in looking at all these phases, how in the world has TAPS strategized so beautifully the phases of grief and how to assist that person? And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, I just had the death of a loved one, and now my finances are in complete disarray, and now I've got the dignity factor. So on top of grief, my money has become unmanageable, or maybe I've spent too much. Okay, maybe I'm hoarding. There's so many levels of what grief can do. How in the world does TAPS make all those strategies. And if I may, I should have asked you this question before we're on this video. I've had this idea while we were talking. Can employers come to TAPS if they have a military person inside their realm that they see as grieving? And how can their philanthropy inside that organization help TAPS with their needs, TAPS with TAPS needs? Does that make sense, Audrey?
Sure, sure it does.
Look at how you've helped my organization.
So there are a couple of things.
Okay.
One, to address the first part of what you said, I think that it's important for. Actually, let's pause for a second. I want to gather my thoughts. The first question that you had was, okay, let me just back up. I think it's important first to address how it is that we do what we do with families. The first thing that we really want to look at anytime we're working with someone is to just start with where they are. Listening skills come in strong play in those early conversations. We want to be able to find out, are there some stabilizing issues with a family that are going on? Because you can't get to the grief. You can be overwhelmed by the grief. You can have intense physical impacts of the grief. But if you're dealing with basic needs, if you can't feed yourself, if you can't, if you don't have power, if you're having a hard time making your bill, the challenge that you have financially is going to impede your ability to even lean in to other things like engaging your grief and hopefully learning and growing through that and getting to a point of healing. You have to first focus on those stabilizing things. So when we are working with someone from the outset, we are listening for and assessing for what is their greatest challenge right now? What is the most helpful thing that I can do right now? Is it trauma stabilization? Is this a family who has recently experienced a loss to suicide? Is there some support that we need to provide around that trauma piece? Connecting them with either financial resources to help deal with the fallout, perhaps connecting them with a therapy option to deal with some of that trauma stabilization. And so before we could even get to other things, we're going to get to those pieces. And we really look holistically at the individual, and we look across the spectrum of what it is that they need. So it's not really a one size fits all. Wherever you are, you come to us, we're going to meet you in that place of your need, and then we'll expand outward from there according to what's helpful in the next time that we talk with you. And we want to layer information over time because we also don't want to overwhelm people.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. We don't want to overwhelm people. To get to the second part of your question, though, to have an organization or company that has a military member who is grieving a loss. We work with people across the country and around the world who are experiencing a situation where they are in support of a person who's had a loss.
Yes.
So whether it is the spouse of a military member who died, maybe it's the military member, him or herself, who lost a spouse and they need support. We will always receive that call, no matter who it is, and we will give resources and answer questions. Sometimes the best help that we can provide is to direct someone to one of our partners because maybe that meets that particular need. Sometimes it's very specifically related to the grief, and maybe we are the best place for that person. And so we will wrap our arms around that person and say, this is what we can do to meet this need for right now. And certainly it's very helpful to be partnered with those who also work in this space and to receive the support, because we can't do what we do without others coming to support us, because we receive no government funding. We're 100% private and corporate donations. So.